Good morning, students. Today, from your Flamingo textbook, we are doing chapter Deep Water, written by William Douglas. William Douglas was born in Maine, Minnesota. After graduating with a Bachelor's of Arts in English and Economics, he spent 2 years teaching high school in Yakima. However, he got tired of this and decided to pursue a legal career. He met Franklin D. Roosevelt at Yale and became an advisor and friend to the president. Douglas was a leading advocate of individual rights. He retired in 1975 with a term lasting 36 years and remains the longest serving justice in the history of the court. The following excerpt is taken from Of Men and Mountains by William O. Douglas. It reveals as a young boy, William Douglas nearly drowned in a swimming pool. In this essay, he talks about his fear of water and thereafter how he finally overcame it. Now, students, the theme covered in this chapter is fear and his triumph over it. It conveys the idea that fear is a great obstacle to our happiness and progress. It is a negative feeling which we can overcome by sheer willpower and optimism. So let's start with our chapter. It says, "It had happened when I was 10 or 11 years old. I had decided to learn to swim." So the narrator tells us that how when at the age of 10 or 11 he decided that he needs to learn to swim. There was a pool at the YMCA in Yakima that offered exactly the opportunity. And he thought that YMCA pool in Yakima City is a perfect place to learn swimming. The Yakima River was treacherous. Mother continually warned against it and kept fresh in my mind the details of each drowning in the river. He tells us how there were incidences of drowning in the Yakima River as it was very treacherous, it was dangerous, and mother continuously warned the author against it that there are many drowning incidences reported every now and then about the Yakima River. But the YMCA pool was safe. But the narrator felt that YMCA pool where he has decided to learn swimming was safe. Now, why it was safe? It was only 2 or 3 feet deep at the shallow end, and while it was 9 feet deep at the other, the drop was gradual. Gradual means not steep or abrupt. Now the author tells that how he felt that YMCA pool was safe because at the deep end it was just 9 feet, but at the shallow end it was just 2 or 3 feet depth. I got a pair of water wings and went to the pool. So finally he decided that he needs to learn swimming. So he got for himself water wings. I hated to walk naked into it and show my skinny legs. But I subdued my pride and did it. The narrator tells that how he felt conscious of exposing. Exposing what? Skinny legs. That is, he was very thin. But I subdued my pride. But he controlled his pride. He overcame his pride and he did it. And he decided finally that yes, he needs to learn swimming. From the beginning, however, I had an aversion to the water when I was in it. Now, William Douglas tells us that he had an aversion, that is, strong dislike of the water from the very beginning. This started when I was 3 or 4 years old and father took me to the beach in California. Now he narrates us an incident that why he disliked water. He disliked water when from the very beginning, that he was just 3 or 4 years old. From that very age, he disliked being in water. And what's the incident? That his father took him to the beach in California. He and I stood together in the surf, and he, along with his father, is standing together in the surf. Surf, that is the foam produced by the waves. I hung on to him, yet the waves knocked me down and swept over me. So he tells us that how he caught hold of his father tightly, but then the strong waves hit him and he was altogether surrounded by water. I was buried in water. My breath was gone. I was frightened. And he's telling us that how from that incident he felt frightened, he was terrorized because he was altogether enveloped in water and he felt as if his breath was gone. Father laughed, but there was terror in my heart at the overpowering force of the waves. Now Father laughed seeing the son in water, but then it was not a serious laugh, it was laugh that the son is playing with the water. But then this incident had a deep impact on William Douglas. He was terrorized with the strong force of the waves. My introduction to the YMCA swimming pool revived unpleasant memories and stirred childish fears. Now, when at the age of 10 he has decided that he would learn swimming in YMCA pool, the incidences of his childhood were revived. Unpleasant memories, that is the memories of California beach, were revived, that is they were made fresh again, and stirred childish fears and evoked childish fear of being in water. But in a little while I gathered confidence. I paddled with my new water wings, watching the other boys and trying to learn by aping them. He tells us that how slowly he was gaining confidence. How he was copying others, aping them, that is copying, to imitate. He started copying the other boys, how they used to behave in water, and he used to paddle with his new water wings and started gaining confidence in himself. I did this 2 or 3 times on different days and was just beginning to feel at ease in the water when the misadventure happened. So he tells us that how he started practicing 2 or 3 times on different days with the water wings and trying to copy and imitate the other boys who were coming there to learn to swim, and he was beginning to feel at ease in the water. He was trying to be comfortable being in the water when a misadventure, an unfortunate incident happened. Now he narrates to us the incident. What incident happened with him? I went to the pool when no one else was there. So he tells us that one day he was early to the swimming pool, YMCA pool, and there was nobody over there. The place was quiet, the water was still, and the tile bottom was as white and clean as a bathtub. So he tells us that there was nobody around, and one can see the clear water, the tiled bottom of the pool, and there was quite calm everywhere around. There was nobody over there. I was timid about going in alone, so I sat on the side of the pool to wait for others. I was timid, that is, the narrator, the author, he was timid. He had no confidence in himself. He lacked courage to go in alone in the swimming pool. So he sat by the edge of the pool, waiting for the other boys to join him. I had not been there long when in came a big bruiser of a boy, probably 18 years old. So he had been waiting over there, sitting by the edge of the pool, waiting for other kids to come. When a boy, 18 years old, he comes over there, and he's a big boy, he's a strong bruiser. Bruiser means strong person, rough and tough boy. Boy comes over there. He had thick hair on his chest, so he's a grown-up boy. He was a beautiful physical specimen with legs and arms that showed rippling muscles. Rippling muscle, bulging muscle. So The impressive physique of the boy has been told to us that he had good muscles, beautiful specimen, beautiful sample of a impressive physique. He yelled, he shouted. He stands for the boy, the big bruiser boy. He shouted, "Hi, Skinny." Skinny here stands for William Douglas. He says, "Hi, Skinny. How would you like to be ducked?" So he announces to William Douglas that how it would be if I duck you, if I thrust you underwater, if I throw you underwater. With that, he picked me up and tossed me into the deep end. And the boy announces how it would be if I duck you, and he picks William Douglas and he threw him to the deep end of the pool, deep side of the pool. I landed in a sitting position, swallowed water, and went at once to the bottom. Now, William Douglas was sitting at the edge of the pool, so he was not prepared for this. And when he was thrown in the water, he landed in a sitting position. And as he is going in the water, in the depth of the water, he swallows some of the water. I was frightened, but not yet frightened out of my wits. He was frightened, he was scared, but then he was not scared to the extent that his mind would become numb. He was alert, his mind was alert, he was able to think. On the way down, I planned. When my feet hit the bottom, I would make a big jump, come to the surface, lie flat on it, and paddle to the edge of the pool. So he makes a plan how he is going to save himself. He plans that as he is going to go to the bottom of the pool, he is going to hit too hard to the bottom and would make a big jump, a big leap to the surface. Then he would lie flat onto the surface, and with his hands, with his legs, he would come to the edge of the pool. It seemed a long way down. Those 9 feet were more than 90. And before I touched bottom, my legs were ready to burst. But for William Douglas, he was terrorized, and those 9 feet turned for him 90. And before he could touch the bottom, the tiled bottom of the pool, his lungs were bursting. Why? Because he was swallowing water. But when my feet hit bottom, I summoned all my strength and made what I thought was a great spring upwards. But when he felt the tiled bottom, with all his strength summoned, that is muster, gather, with all his strength, he made a big jump. Great spring, spring means jump. He made a big jump to the surface of the water. I imagined I would bob up to the surface like a cork. He thought that he is going to come up to the surface of the water like a cork does. Instead, I came up slowly, but then he came very slowly. His body came up to the surface very slowly. I opened my eyes and saw nothing but water. Water that had a dirty yellow tinge to it. So he is coming up to the surface of the water, and he sees what? He sees water, and that water had a dirty yellow color to it. I grew panicky. He was altogether scared, frightened, full of fear. I reached up as if to grab a rope, and my hands clutched only at water. Now he's reaching to the surface. He wants to hold a rope, but then he got only water in his hands. I was suffocating. He was suffocating. He was choked. Why? Because he was swallowing water. I tried to yell, but no sound came out. Now he wanted to shout for help, shout somebody would help him. But then the voice did not come, the sound did not come out. Then my eyes and nose came out of the water, but not my mouth. And with efforts, he was able to come out, but then just his eyes and nose. He was not able to pull his body altogether out of the water. His mouth did not come out of the water. And he swallowed more and more water. I valleyed at the surface of the water, swallowed and choked. William Douglas says that how he started striking his legs and arms vigorously at the surface of the water. He swallowed more and more water and choked. I tried to bring my legs up, but they hung as dead weights, paralyzed and rigid. He wanted to bring his legs up. His eyes was out, his nose was out, but then the rest of the body was not responding to the brains, the plan he had done for himself. So his legs were hung as dead weights, as lifeless things, and paralyzed and rigid and stiff. A great force was pulling me inside. He felt as if some force in the water is pulling him in the bottom of the pool. I screamed, but only the water heard me. I had started on the long journey back to the bottom of the pool. William Douglas started screaming. He wanted to scream, but then he was altogether surrounded by water, and water could only hear him. He started on a long journey back to the bottom of the pool, and again he was drowning in the water for the second time. I stuck at the water as I went down, expending my strength as one in a nightmare fights an irresistible force. Now, as he's moving down, he's striking, he's hitting the water as he's moving down, expending my strength, that is, spending all his strength on as if in a nightmare fights. Now, the writer, the author, compares his situation to a person who sees a nightmare and fights against the dreadful dream, but is unable to ward it off. I had lost all my breath. He became altogether breathless. My lungs ached, my head throbbed. His lungs were paining, and his head was beating. It was throbbing. I was getting dizzy. He was getting altogether faint, giddy. But I remembered the strategy. I would spring from the bottom of the pool and come like a cork to the surface. I would lie flat onto the water, strike out with my arms, and thrash with my legs, that is, beat with my legs. Then I would get to the edge of the pool and be safe. But as he's moving down in the water in the swimming pool, he remembered that he had made some plan, he had made some strategy to fight with this water to rescue himself. And he planned that what he's going to do is going to reach to the bottom of the pool, and with all his strength is going to jump up, move up like a cork to the surface of the water, and then he's going to lie flat to the surface of the water with his arms, with his legs. He's going to strike the water and come to the edge of the pool. I went down, down endlessly. Now the author says that how that 9 feet depth of the swimming pool turned out to be endless. I opened my eyes, nothing but water with a yellow glow, dark water that one could not see through. And he says that how he saw there was darkness all around, though the water had a yellow glow, but then he felt that he could not see through this water. And then sheer, stark terror seized me, and then the terror seized him, clutched him. Terror that knows no understanding, terror that knows no control, terror that no one can understand who has not experienced it. Narrator says, author says that how he was in the clutches of terror, and one can only understand his fear, his terror only if they have experienced so. I was shrieking under water, and he was trembling under water. He was crying wildly under water. I was paralyzed under water, stiff, rigid with fear, and he felt thus unable to move. He is all paralyzed, and his body is not responding. He does not move. The legs does not move. He is all stiff and hard, rigid. Even the screams in my throat were frozen. Only my heart and the pounding in my head said that I was still alive. It was just his heart, and the beating in his head said that he is alive. And he wanted to scream, but then the screams were frozen. And then, in the midst of the terror, came a touch of reason. And then, in this midst of terror, though he is under terror, he's been seized, he's been clutched by terror, he says that he had a touch of reason. That is, he had recollected the plan, the strategy. I must remember to jump when I hit the bottom. And again, he's taking up all his strength and trying to make sure that he does not lose his strategy, and he is to jump up when he reaches to the tiled bottom. At last I felt the tiles under me. My toes reached out as if to grab them. I jumped with everything I had, and when he felt under his toes the tiled bottom, he took all his strength, and he mustered all his strength and jumped to the surface of the water. But the jump made no difference, but all his efforts were in vain. They were useless. The water was still around me, and he was still encircled or enveloped with water. I looked for ropes, ladders, water wings. He's looking for something that can rescue his life, like ropes, guard ropes, ladders, water wings. Nothing but water. But what came in his hand? He caught only water. A mass of yellow water held me, and there was altogether he was surrounded by water all around him. Stark terror took an even deeper hold on me, like a great charge of electricity, like an electric shock that ran through one's body, the whole body. Similarly, he felt that he was terrorized. There was a great intense terror grew in his mind. I shook and trembled with fright. He is altogether frightened. My arms wouldn't move, my legs wouldn't move. I tried to call for help, to call for mother. Nothing happened. Now he wanted to shout, he wanted to cry for help, he wanted to ask people to come and help him. He wanted to move his arms, his legs, but then his body is not responding to his brain, his strategy, and nothing happened, and he was altogether helpless. And then, strangely, there was light. I was coming out of awful yellow water. At least my eyes were. My nose was almost out, too. And then the narrator says that how something strange happened, and he felt that there was some light, and he felt that he's coming out of water. Which water? Yellow water. But then what water? Awful. This awful water has enveloped him, encircled him, terrorized him. But then he felt there is light and is coming out. At least my eyes were. My nose was almost out too. He felt that he can bring up his body, his eyes, his nose. But then it was just his eyes and nose. Then I started down a third time. I sucked for air and got water. Then his body did not come out. His mouth did not come out. His mouth did not come out, so he couldn't breathe. He couldn't shout. He couldn't ask for help. And his body started moving down to the pool for the third time. I sucked for air, so he wanted to breathe some air and got water and gulped more and more water. The yellowish light was going out, and then he saw that his body is moving down, and that light that he felt was there, it was getting faded. It was going out. Then all efforts ceased. I relaxed, and then when his body is going down for the third time in the pool, in the depth of the pool, his efforts ceased. He stopped all efforts to save himself. I relaxed, and he felt relaxed. Even my legs felt limp, and a blackness swept over my brain. He felt as if his legs were lifeless. They were not responding. He was not able to bring his body, his legs up. And blackness swept over my brain. and he felt that there was a temporary loss of consciousness. He felt as if his brain has become numb. It wiped out fear, it wiped out terror. There was no more panic. It was quiet and peaceful. And as he felt relaxed, he felt that he does not want to make any sort of efforts. He felt peaceful, he felt quiet, he was no more panicky. It ended all sorts of fear and terror. Nothing to be afraid of. This is nice to be drowsy, to go to sleep. No need to jump, too tired to jump. It's nice to be carried gently, to float along in space, tender arms around me, tender arms like mothers. Now I must go to sleep. Now he was not able to make efforts to lift his body up, and he was drowning underneath the water in the pool. And then he felt that it was altogether his body is floating as if it is floating in the space. He does not want to make any efforts to jump. He wants to be drowsy. He wants to go for sleep. He wants to feel the tender arms and warmth of the mother. And he felt that I must go to sleep, sleep of unconsciousness. I crossed to oblivion, and the curtain of life fell, and he felt as if he has become unconscious and he has drifted away towards death. The next I remember, I was lying on my stomach beside the pool, vomiting. When he gained consciousness, he saw himself by the poolside and lying on his stomach, and he was vomiting all the water that he had gulped or swallowed. He was vomiting. The chap that threw me in was saying, but I was only fooling. So the boy, the 18-year-old bruiser who had threw William Douglas in the water, in the pool, he said he was just making some fun. Someone said, the kid nearly died. Be all right now. Let's carry him to the locker room. One of the persons over there in YMCA pool said that the kid had almost faced death, but then he's fine now. We should carry him to the locker room. Several hours later, I walked home. I was weak and trembling. Now, several hours later, when he felt good in himself, he was able to walk. He went home from the pool, but then he was very terrorized. He felt weak. He was shivering with that terror, the fear that he has faced of drowning in the YMCA pool. I shook and cried when I lay on my bed. He was crying by himself in his bed because that terror had a tight hold, clutched him, his mind, his thoughts, his physical, his body, everything. I couldn't eat that night. That night he was altogether restless. He did not had his meal. For days a haunting fear was in my heart, and for many days this incident of YMCA pool haunted him. The slightest exertion upset me, making me wobbly in the knees and sick to my stomach. So, even the slightest work or pressure that came to him, he felt altogether weak, scared, terrified, and he felt sick. He felt as if he does not have any strength, and never went back to the pool. I feared water. I avoided it whenever I could. And he was so scared or frightened of water that he dropped the idea of learning to swim, and he did not return back to YMCA pool. And he avoided all sorts of water activities, and he felt haunted by that incident time and again. A few years later, when I came to know the waters of the Cascades, I wanted to get into them. And whenever I did, whether I was wading the wading, that is to walk through, or bumping river, or bathing in warm lake of the goat's rocks, the terror that had seized me, took hold on me, clutched me in the pool would come back. So he says that later, after many years, he learned about waterfalls, he learned about the pumping rivers, he wanted to enjoy bathing in the waters, but whenever he wished and desired to enjoy any of the water activity, he was terrorized by the incident that happened in YMCA pool. It would take possession of me completely, and that terror would possess his mind, his body completely. He get haunted and scared of the incident that happened with him. My legs would become paralyzed. Icy horror would grab my heart. And whenever he wished to enjoy any water sport, whether it was water activity, whether it was being under a waterfall or just wading in any of the rivers or enjoy swimming or bathing, he was terrorized and paralyzed. His body would not respond, his body would become stiff and rigid, and it was horror that grabs his heart. This handicap stayed with me as the years rolled by. William Douglas says that how this handicap that is fear of water, stayed with him as the years rolled by, as he grew up, as many years passed, but this fear was there in his mind, in his heart. In canoes on main lakes, fishing for landlocked salmon, bass fishing in New Hampshire, trout fishing on the Deschutes and Metellus in Oregon, fishing for salmon on the Columbia at Bumping Lake in the Cascades. Wherever I went, the haunting fear of water followed me. Now he tells us that how he was altogether terrorized in water. He wanted to go for boating, canoes. Canoes is a light, narrow boats. So he wanted to go for boating, or he wanted to go for fishing, variety of fishes he's talking of landlocked salmon, he's talking of bass, of trout fishing. So he wanted to go for this fishing spree, but then he was not able to enjoy his fishing trips because he was haunted by the fear of water. It ruined my fishing trips, deprived me of the joy of canoeing, boating, and swimming. He says that how his fear, his terror of water ruined all his water activities, whether it was boating or swimming or fishing. I used every way I knew to overcome this fear, but it held me firmly in its grip. So he did all sorts of measures to come out of this fear of water. But then the fear of water had terrorized him altogether, and he felt that he is gripped in that terror. Finally, one October, I decided to get an instructor and learn to swim. So finally, he thought that it would be very difficult because he would not be able to enjoy any of the fishing sports or water activities. So he thought that he should get an instructor for himself and should learn swimming. So this was in the month of October. I went to a pool and practiced 5 days a week, an hour each day. So he got an instructor for himself, and 5 days a week he started practicing 1 hour each day. The instructor put a belt around me. A rope attached to the belt went through a pulley that ran on an overhead cable. Now, William Douglas is describing the learning process that the instructor had taught him, how he taught his lessons of swimming to William Douglas. The instructor put a belt around William Douglas' waist. The belt was attached to a thick rope. The rope went through an overhead cable and was held by the instructor. He held on to the end of the rope, and we went back and forth across the pool, hour after hour, day after day, week after week. So the instructor is holding one end of the rope, and he is making William Doug practice time and again the length of the pool back and forth, and hour after hour, week after week. Now the instructor ensured that in case William Douglas drowned, the instructor would able to pull him out. He is holding that rope from one end. Why? So that in case he is drowned, he can pull him up. On each trip across the pool, a bit of panic seized me. Now he tells that as he started learning his lessons, he is going back and forth in that pool, the length of the pool. When he's doing this trip across the pool, the panic would seize him, the panic would take hold of him. The panic, the misadventure that he had faced in YMCA pool, that took hold of him. Each time the instructor relaxed his hold on the rope, I went under. Some of the old terror returned and my legs froze. So the minute instructor tried to lose his hands, tried to lose his grip onto the rope, William Douglas the body started going inside the pool, and the terror would return. And he says that how his legs froze, how his legs became paralyzed, how his leg became immobilized, and he was again in the clutches of that fear of water. It was 3 months before the tension began to slack. So he says that how he took 3 months and he slowly the tension this fear was becoming to reduce, lessen. Then he taught me to put my face under water and exhale, and to raise my nose and inhale. Then the next exercise that the instructor did with William Douglas was the inhale and exhale of air, that is to breathe in and breathe out. That how he is going to breathe, how he is going to exhale under the water, and how he is going to breathe in air outside the water through his nose. I repeated the exercise hundreds of times. So many times he repeated the same exercise of inhale and exhale, in and out water. Bit by bit, gradually, I shed part of the panic. He got rid of this panic that seized me when my head went underwater. So this panic when he was under the grab of that terror, that slowly, gradually, this was shed. Next, he held me at the side of the pool and had me kick with my legs. So the third exercise, the third phase of the instructor was, first was to go back and forth in the pool with one hand on the rope. Second was inhale and exhale exercise in and outside water. And third was what? To kick with my legs, that is to do the exercise of kicking the water surface with his legs. For weeks I did just that. So for weeks the instructor asked him to just kick the water surface with his legs. At first my legs refused to work, but they gradually relaxed and finally I could command them. So when he started with this exercise, the leg exercise, the legs became paralyzed. They did not work according to the commands of his brain, but finally the legs became relaxed and he could command them, he could control his legs, and he did the desired exercise that was asked by the instructor. Thus, piece by piece, he built a swimmer, and slowly, with all these tactics of swimming or the techniques of swimming, the instructor built a swimmer out of William Douglas. And when he had perfected each piece, he put them together into an integrated whole. And when with these exercise of inhale and exhale, exercise of beating the water surface with legs, of swimming back and forth in the pool, when these exercises he did, the instructor compiled him, the techniques he had taught him, he compiled him into a one person, an integrated whole, a swimmer. Now William Douglas was no more scared of water, he had turned out to be a swimmer. In April, he said, "Now you can swim, dive off and swim the length of the pool crawl stroke." So the instructor demanded that he should dive off the pool to the length of the pool and demanded him to do the crawl stroke as he was a swimmer, and this was in April. I did, and very confidently William Douglas swam to the length of the pool The instructor was finished. The job of the instructor was finished. The classes of swimming were end. It came to an end. But I was not finished. But then the job of William Douglas was not finished. He was wondering, will the terror return? Will he get scared? Will he get panicky when he is all alone by himself? So his job was not finished. I still wondered if I would be terror stricken when I was alone in the pool. So he started wondering, if I'm all alone by myself in the pool, will the terror return back? Will I get frightened? I tried it. So he tried to test himself. I swam the length up and down. So he swam to the length of the pool, back and forth. Tiny vestiges of the old terror would return. So tiny parts, small pieces of the terror would return. But now I could frown and say to that terror, trying to scar me, well, here's to you, look. And off I would go for another length of the pool. But then, when the terror returned, he frowned at it, frowned at the terror. He became angry at the terror that you're trying to scare me, you're trying to make me afraid. But then he dived to the length of the pool very successfully and confidently. This went on until July, but I was still not satisfied. So, from April to July, he had been doing his swimming all by alone, by himself, and he was still not satisfied whether the fear would return, he would get terrorized. I was not sure that all the terror had left, so I went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire, dived off a dock at Triggis Island, and swam 2 miles across the lake to Stampact Island. So he was not sure whether the terror had left. He thought maybe he might get terrorized if he's all alone in any of the water bodies or pool. So, to check himself, he went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire, and over there from Triggis Island to Stampact Island, he swam 2 miles all by himself, all alone. I swam the crawl, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke, and these are the stroke that his teacher, his instructor had made him learn, so he tried all the strokes. Only once did the terror return. When I was in the middle of the lake, I put my face under and saw nothing but bottomless water. So when he was in the middle of the lake, from Triggis Island to Stampact Island, the lake, he was swimming. In the very middle, when he was all alone by himself in the bottomless water, he saw altogether he was terrorized. But the old sensation returned in miniatures. And this sensation, the sensation of fear, the sensation of uh, terror, this returned in small amount, in small piece. I laughed and said, well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me? It fled and I swam on. So very confidently he swam that 2 miles and he shouted at Mr. Terror, and Mr. Terror fled, it vanished, and he swam on, he resumed his swimming. Yet I had residual doubts. So again he thought maybe this time the terror fled. Maybe next time again the terror is going to grab him in its clutches. So he thought no, he should test himself again. At my first opportunity, I hurried west, went up to the Titan to Conrad Meadows, up the Conrad Creek Trail to Meteor Glacier, and camped in the high meadow by the side of Warm Lake. So he went to the western side, western direction to the Conrad Meadows, and over there he camped in the high meadows near the Warm Lake. The next morning I dived into the lake and swam across to the other shore and back just as Doc Corcoran used to do. So next morning he got ready in his swimming costume and dived into the lake. Which lake? That is a Warm Lake. And he swam across and he copied Doc Corcoran. He used to swim in that lake. So he also swam across to the other shore and back. I shouted with joy, and Gilbert Peak returned the echo. I had conquered my fear of water. And when he was able to swim all alone by himself in the warm lake, he was very elated, very happy, and he shouted. And Gilbert Peak resounded the elation, the joy. I had conquered my fear of water, and he overcame his fear of water. The experience had a deep meaning for me, as only those who have stark terror and conquered it can appreciate. In death, there is peace. There is terror only in the fear of death, as Roosevelt knew when he said, "All we have to fear is fear itself." He says that this experience has a great impact on him, and it had taught him that there is peace in death, but there is the terror in the fear of death. Death is torturous. The fear of death is torturous, and it is very necessary to get rid of this fear. Otherwise, man will die many deaths before his life actually comes to an end, and it will make life very miserable and fearful. Roosevelt, that is an American president, he said, "What all we have to fear is fear itself." That is, fear is a negative feeling, and as it is great obstacles to one's happiness and progress. We should not be afraid of it and try to overcome it with confidence, courage, and hope. Because I had experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear of it can produce, the will to live somehow grew in intensity. William Douglas says that he tasted near death sensation as well as the terror that fear of it can produce afterwards. So both these sensations had stimulated in him an urge for survival and intensified his will to live. At last, I felt released, free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside fear. Brush aside, that is to ignore fear. So he says, the experience of fear and death and its conquest made him live intensely. Conquering fear made him realize the true value of life, and this helped him enjoy every moment of his living. He finally learned to live life to the fullest.